So 4 years ago, I began checking something off my bucket list that had been on there, honestly, longer than some of you freshmen have been alive because I'm that old. I started training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now, no, don't clap. It's the dumbest thing I've ever done. I know a lot of you don't have context for that, like particular martial art, and so I like to describe it as really aggressive cuddling, okay? Essentially, I go to the gym, and you get a partner, and we basically learn takedowns. We learn how to advance position. There's no strikes. There's no hitting. There's no punching. There's no kicking. It's all grappling. But the ultimate goal is we learn how to basically apply chokes to block blood flow and airflow to your brain until you tap. Or we learn how to apply like arm locks and leg locks and body locks. Basically, learn how to contort each other's bodies in such painful ways until your opponent taps, right? It's such a lovely sport. And so about 2 weeks into this journey, this would have been summer 2020, it was probably literally my fourth or fifth class. I went to a night class, and you just get kind of partnered up with somebody, and I ended up getting partnered up with this high school boy named Jackson, okay? Jackson is, you know the kid, he's 6'20", and he weighs 81 pounds, and when he turns sideways, he just disappears, right? And so poor Jackson gets stuck with geriatric chubby me, and at that point I weighed 25 pounds more than I weigh now, and we were drilling that night leg triangles, okay? I thought about bringing a boy up here, but I'm worried that me plus gravity and your twiggy leg, it would be a bad thing. So let me just show you. This is a leg triangle right over here, okay? The person on the bottom is in control, and basically they're blocking the blood flow, the carotid artery on one side of the neck with their own leg. And on the other side, they're blocking it with their opponent's arm with pressure from the leg, right? And if you're really good at it, which I'm not because I'm not a bendy boy, but if you're really good at it, you can literally make your opponent tap or pass out within 4 or 5 seconds. I mean, it's really brutal, right? And so we're learning this. So they show us the moves and the process and the steps, and Jackson does it to me, and I do it to Jackson, and we do it to full submission. He does it to me until I tap, because he doesn't know if he's doing it right unless I'm right? So we tap, and so he does it to me, and I do it to him. He does it to me, I do it to him. And it was my third or fourth time to do the leg triangle to Jackson that night. And I'm going through the steps, okay? So I'm going to switch my hips and break his grip on my belt. And I'm going to put my foot on the hip and switch my hips again and shoot my leg up over his head and lock my ankles together. And then I'm going to grab my ankle. I'm going to elevate my hips. I'm going to move his arm over. And as I move his arm over, I get to the point where I'm going to start squeezing with my legs and pulling down on his head. And I had a moment, okay? And for you to understand this moment, I need you to look at this picture and notice the proximity of me on the bottom, my buttocks to Jackson's throat, okay? Because the moment that I had as I elevated my hips off the ground and started pulling on his head and squeezing my thighs was a moment of a lack of sphincter control, okay? I tooted. And toot is a nice, kind word for what I did. It does not do justice. If you've ever seen a cruise ship pulling out of the bay. It was 2 seconds of just oh, right? And so I just ripped this absolute earth-shattering beefer, right? And as soon as it happens, he's locked in my legs and his head's down. And I just remember he kind of looked up and his eyes got really big. And I dropped my legs and he kind of sat up and he said to me, and I swear to you, and I quote, "I felt that in my throat." And I was like, "I'm so sorry." And in that moment, my response was I literally wanted to run away and crawl in a hole and die. As an adult, I have no shame. I have no pride. I'm telling 1,000+ people that I've never met that I just rattled the kid's esophagus with my flatulence. I have no right. But at that point at the gym, I was so new and so nervous, and I'm claustrophobic, and you got to get really close to other people's bodies, and it was new to me that when I literally rattled his soul through his throat, my response was, I want to run far, far away, and I want to never see you again, right? Now here's the deal. That response right there, that response that I had with Jackson, the desire to run and flee and never see again, that is exactly what we do to other humans when we wrong them. And I don't mean rattle their esophagus with your flatulence. I mean when you really, really wrong somebody, you really hurt somebody, you fracture your friendship, right? Gossip, slander, mistreatment, bullying. When you really have wronged another human, our natural response is the same thing that I had in my heart with Jackson is we want to put distance between us and them, right? Maybe we heap some shame on ourselves, like, oh man, I can't believe you did that, but we want to run away from them and put distance between us and them. And we think to ourselves, there's no way that person is ever going to want anything to do with me ever again because of what I did and how I hurt them and how I failed them and how I betrayed them, right? And here's the thing, at a much deeper level, that response is exactly what we do with God. That when you are caught up in it, and when you are caught up in sin and you fail and you succumb to temptation, when you royally mess up, and I don't know what it is, man. I work with students and I know what my kids deal with, but I know that this room is full of kids who want to belong so much with the wrong crowd, and you're willing to do and say anything to fit in, and you dishonor God, and there are girls and guys in here that want to belong to another individual romantically so much that you let that relationship lead you places and down roads you shouldn't go, right, just for the sake of belonging to someone. I know that there's addiction in this room to substances and images, and I know that there are kids in this room that want to elevate themselves socially so bad that even this week you've belittled and mistreated each other. And dude, I could go on and on and on with what I see in my own students. And I know right now, there are a lot of you that are caught up in it. That you've got sin and you've got struggles and things that you're doing and saying that you know dishonor God. And your natural reaction when you wrong him and you fail him and you hurt your relationship with him is you want to run. You want to take your shame shovel and just heap shovelfuls of shame and guilt on yourself, right? And you want to put as much distance between you and God as possible. You don't want to be in his presence. You don't want to be in his word. You don't want to be around his people. Right now, there's probably some of you sitting with a youth group that you've been MIA with for months because you started doing things you know you shouldn't, and you're caught up in it, and you're trying to keep God and his people away because it just brings more shame and guilt. And so we heap the shame and the guilt, and we put distance between us and God. And as we're running away from him, we think to ourselves, there's no way he'd ever want to use us, no way he'd ever want anything to do with us because of what we're caught up in or what we've done or where we've been. And here's what you're going to learn tonight. I know students, like look at the chubby guy in the eyes, okay? Here's what you're going to learn. First of all, whatever you're caught up in, whatever you've been caught up in, whatever you're struggling with, he knew about it before you ever even conceived it. It's not a surprise to him. He's not scared. He knew. Another thing you're going to learn is that what he wants from you is to set your shame shovel down and stop beating yourself up thinking he hates you and he's mad at you, and stop running away from him and putting distance between yourself and him and his people and his word and his presence. And he wants you to rest in his love, his perfect love that doesn't need you to do or not do anything in order for you to earn it. And he wants you to rest in that. And you're going to find yourselves tonight across a breakfast table from the Son of God. And the topic at hand is your absolute, utter failure. And he's going to say to you, hey, we don't have time with that mess because I've got an offering for you. I'm offering you rest in my love, and I've got an invitation. And my invitation is to purpose and to kingdom work. I want you to feed my sheep. And that's exactly what you're going to see in the life of this dude, Simon Peter, that we're going to dig into tonight, right? And here's the problem, is that Simon Peter's story is kind of multiple parts, and we're going to find ourselves over here most of the time in part 3 of his story in John chapter 21. But in order to fully understand that, we got to like helicopter fly over part number 2 and then helicopter fly over part number 1. Sorry, camera people, but I'm like a meth head up here. Sorry. And so let's jump into part 1, okay? Part 1 of Peter's story. Before we jump in, I kind of want to do a little bit of some background, right? Because I know that there's a lot of Tibbits out here that weren't raised in the church, and they're like, well, you guys know the story of Noah. And I'm like, no, I don't, because I didn't grow up in this mess, okay? And so let me give you some background on Simon Peter, right? He is one of Jesus' 12 disciples. And not only that, but he's one of Jesus' 2 closest homies. He's like in the circle within the circle. He and John are like Jesus' closest followers, best friends, right? But what you also need to know about Simon Peter, and I love this guy, he's like a freshman boy, okay? He's brash, he's impulsive, probably has ADHD, he acts without thinking, he speaks before, thinking, and ends up like putting his foot so far down his throat he like can lick the back of his knee, right? He gets himself into some messes sometimes. Like I love this guy because I am this guy, okay? And so in part one, here's where you find Simon Peter. He is in this room of a house, upper room, and Jesus is about to be arrested. He's about to go be crucified, and he's sharing this last meal with his homies. And so Simon Peter and the other disciples are up there with Jesus. And in that room, Jesus begins in part one of Simon Peter's story, John 13, if you want to look it up. Jesus begins predicting his death. He's saying, hey, I'm going to have to leave pretty soon. And where I'm going, you can't follow. And when he says this, Simon Peter, remember, 9th grade boy, is like, Lord, where are you going where we can't go? Like he's questioning Jesus, right? And Jesus says again, like, you can't go with me where I'm going. I'm going to be away for a while. And Simon, like, rebukes Jesus. Like, Lord, I will follow you anywhere. I will lay down my life for you, right? And in this moment, Jesus says to him, Simon Peter, before the rooster crows 3 times, tomorrow morning, you're going to deny that you ever even knew me 3 times. And why did Jesus say this? I don't think he's just like trying to make him feel shame and guilt, and you'll find out why later. I think he's saying this to him, so he's basically saying, Simon, you're going to fail so hard. And what you need to know is I'm not scared of it, and I'm good with it. I'm going to go die for you anyway, right? I'm telling you now so that when it happens, you know that I know, and I got you, right? And so you jump over here to part 2. So the prediction of the betrayal, part 2 is they leave that room, they finish that holy supper of Passover, they go to the garden, Jesus gets arrested. Simon Peter, again, freshman boy, tries to prevent it. He yanks a sword off of a soldier and tries to hack a dude's head off and fails miserably and somehow only mangles his ear. How do you try to murder someone and only mangle their ear? But somehow he did it, and Jesus was like, fixed it, right? And so Jesus gets arrested, and he goes off to be tried, right? He goes to this series of trials, and it's like the Jews want to kill him, but the Romans don't want to be the one to pull the trigger, and so they just kind of pass him back and forth for like 5 or 6 trials, right? And while Jesus is going through this, one of Jesus' 2 closest homies, not Simon Peter, but John, well, he's got a relationship with the high priest. He's known by him. And so John gets special track. He gets to come inside the room where Jesus is off being interrogated. And he goes in, and he's trying to get Simon Peter brought in. And so Simon Peter's outside waiting to get past the bouncer at the club, so to speak, right? And while he's chilling there, this little slave girl comes up, lowest of the low in the totem pole. And she's like, hey, aren't you one of his followers? He's like, no, I'm not. I don't know him. John gets him access into the room, and he comes into the room, and there's a fire there, and they're all warming themselves because it's cold in the desert at night, and they're within eyesight of Jesus, you'll find out, but they're not within ear, hearing. And Simon Peter's just chilling, and a dude that's around the fire is like, hey, aren't you one of that guy's followers? No, I'm not. I don't know him. And a little while later, actually a relative of the dude that Simon Peter tried to murk, right? It's like his cousin or something, is like, dude, I saw you in the garden. You're one of his followers. I think I saw you when we arrested him. He's like, I swear I'm not. The other gospel writers, other than John, give us more details to his words. He is calling down curses on himself. I don't know the man. And when he says for the 3rd time that he doesn't know Jesus, mere hours after Jesus told him it was going to happen, a couple things happen. Yeah, a rooster crows. But a couple of things that are more important, right? First is Luke tells us that when he denies Jesus for the 3rd time, that wherever Jesus is, Jesus looks up and locks eyes with him. And they have this like eye contact moment, right? And I don't think Jesus is looking at him being like, I told you so. I think he's looking at him like, hey, I told you this is going to happen, right? I'm not scared of this. I got you. I'm going to die for you anyway. But he locks eyes with Peter. And the last thing that happens is as the rooster crows and they lock eyes, Luke tells us that Peter gets up and he runs away weeping, right? Because he's failed. He has failed so hard. Like so bad that he runs away and he abandons Jesus in his most dire moment of need. Like John shows up at the crucifixion. John shows up and gets handed off Jesus' mother to take care of her until the day she dies. Where's Peter? He's fled. He's run away. Why? Some of you guys are sitting here thinking like, well, why would he run, dude? He just lied. I lied 37 times a day. And I know some of you hood rats have, right? But it's it's much deeper than that, okay? You have to understand that he has completely fractured his relationship with Jesus. Let me flesh this out. I am a married man. I know some of you are like, shut the front door. No way. That's a major shocker, okay? I wasn't always this chubby and bald. I used to be chubby and have hair. But I have this beautiful wife named Kelsey Noel. She is beautiful inside out. She is like my best friend, and she's so loyal and faithful, and she's a walking ball of anxiety that worries about everything and can't make any decisions, and I love her to death, right? And so I want you to pretend that my wife and I go to a social gathering. Now, we know we're pretending because we're introverts. No. And so we go to the social gathering, right? And she's over there at the charcuterie board, which she would never do because she's a germaphobe, remember, pretending. And she's talking to some people, and I'm over here interacting with a different group. And as we're sitting there talking, this beautiful woman comes up and joins our conversation. And she starts flirting with me, again, pretending. Okay, we know this would never happen, right? And she's flirting, and she's, and do what she's putting down. I'm picking up. I'm like being Harry Potter, the boy who rizzed, we interacting. I'm like taking off the wedding ring, hiding it in my pocket. And while we're flirting, right, and interacting, somebody who knows me is like, Tibbit, what are you doing? Your wife, Kelsey's right over there, and you're like digging this girl's chili. What are you doing, right? And I say to them in that moment, I'm not married. I don't even know that girl. Who's she? And we keep flirting, and I'm like, Risley Bear. Rawr. And so we're interacting, and we're exchanging numbers, and somebody else confronts me, right? And they're like, Tibbit, what are you doing? Like, you're a married man. You work at a church. Like, what are you? You have a calling on your life. And I'm like, what are you? I'm not married. Hiding the faded non-sunburned spot on my finger. Like, I'm not married. What are you? Let's say that I deny knowing my wife 2, 3, whatever times, right? When I face my wife later on, I'm going to have a whole lot more to sort through than I just lied. Hey, sweetie, sorry, my bad, but she was real pretty. Like, that's not going to cut it. I'm going to have a huge mess on my hands, right? I mean, I've just pretended like the vows I made on December 13, 2003 didn't happen, didn't mean a thing. I'm pretending like 20 years of marriage that we celebrated last December, our life, our church, and our community that we love, our farm, our girls. I'm pretending as if none of that ever happened and none of that meant anything to me. Why? For a moment of selfishness and potential rendezvous, right? Like, I'm going to have a huge mess to sort through. I'll be lucky if she doesn't shank me in my sleep, prison style, okay? Now jump over here to Peter, part 2. Of a story. Why does he run away crying? Why does he abandon Jesus during his trials, his flogging, his crucifixion? Why does he go back to his old life? Dude literally goes back to being a fisherman again. Because he's completely wrecked his relationship with Jesus. And his shoulders are down, full of shame and guilt, and he's thinking to himself, man, I got to put distance between me and him. He doesn't want anything to do with me. There's no way he could want to use me, right? And so over here in part 3, we pick up Peter's story, and he's gone back to fishing. This is John chapter 21. And he's gone back to his old life, and he and a few other disciples are on this boat. They've been fishing all night. They hadn't caught nothing, right? And they're pretty, disappointed. And they're about 100 yards from shore, and this stranger on the shore is like, hey, you guys caught anything? And they're like, nah, man, we ain't caught jack. Hey, you should throw your nets on the other side of the boat. And I literally can see them like high schoolers, like when their mom tells them the most like logical solution to a problem. Like, bruh. But they do it. And they cast their nets on the other side of the boat, and the nets are so full they can't haul them in. Luke says it was 153 fish. And so they get to the shore. Now, before they get to shore, Simon Peter does the most, yet again, junior high boy, 9th grade boy thing in the whole wide world. They had this moment on the boat where they're like, they're hauling the fish in, it's so much, and it's stranger, and they go, this is some Jesus stuff, right? He's always like, woo, 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 alternating the physical world with his little ninja Jesus powers, right? And they're like, it's the Lord. And they have this realization, and what does he do? He had taken off his outer clothing. He's kind of in his undergarment, maybe a shirt, maybe nothing. And he's going to jump in the water and swim to shore. And what does he do? I better put my clothes back on. And then he jumps in the water. That's like, let me put my Nike socks and my Birks on and go, like it makes zero sense. But he's brash. He doesn't think things through. And he swims ashore and he gets there. And Jesus has made a fire. And they sit down and they cook some of the fish that they caught. And they have breakfast. And when they get to the end of breakfast, around the breakfast table, Jesus and Peter have this conversation. You ready? John 21, verse 15. It says, when they finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John. What did he call him? He called him Simon. Put that in the back pocket. We're going to get that out later, okay? Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? What are the these? I think he's talking about the nets and the boat and the fish. Like, homie, don't you love me more than this old life? The years that we did ministry together? You're willing to walk away from the miracles you saw, the teachings that you heard? You're willing to walk away from watching people be resurrected from the dead and run back to this? Like, don't you love me more than this old life that you fled back to? Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, take care of my sheep. And the third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, do you love me? And he said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. And he goes on to predict the death that Peter is going to go through. He's going to be martyred for his faith. But the final two words is so important. You got to put this also in the other pocket. The final two words that Jesus says to him in respect to his failure, follow me. Not do better, not get on my level, not I'm so disappointed. He says, follow me, right? Now here's the deal. I have to mention this because if I don't, your youth ministers are going to go back to youth group time and they're going to be like, he didn't say anything about the Greek words. And I don't want you to suffer through that, them having a little nerdy Jesus Bible college moment. So let me just say, when you read this passage in English, it's kind of like black and white a little bit because there's some stuff going on in the original language. And when you read it and dig into the Greek words, it's kind of like color, right? Because Simon, Peter, and Jesus are not using the same words for love. They're using synonyms, excuse me, not a smart boy, synonyms, okay? In the Greek language, there's like 6 or 7 different words for love. There's like 2 or 3 main ones in Scripture, and here they're using 2, kind of the 2 big ones. One is agape love. It's like an unending, selfless, kind of like God-like love, right? And the other one is philos love, right? It's like the chosen brotherly love, social love. And again, I'm not a Bible college, professor or scholar, and so I'm not doing those justice, but in this conversation, Jesus asked Peter, do you agape me? The first 2 times, he says, do you agape me? And Peter responds, yes, Lord, you know that I phileo you. I love you like a brother. Do you love me unendingly, selflessly like your father? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you like a brother. And so they're using synonyms for love going back and forth. And the third time, Jesus says, Simon Peter, do you phileo me? He uses the word Simon Peter's been using. And he responds, yes, Lord, you know that I phileo you, right? And here's the deal. There's probably something to that. I mean, I think Peter's reaction at the end, it kind of indicative that there's something going on with those synonyms that are being used. But you know what I think is more important? Because, dude, I don't know. What I think is more important is not really the synonyms for love they're using. And I'm quoting my rabbi, M. Moore, who's taught me more about the life of Jesus through the pages of his books than anyone on the planet. I think what's more important here is not the synonyms for love, but the number of times Jesus asked him, do you love me? And the number of times Jesus told him, feed my sheep. Because Simon Peter had denied him 3 times, and here 3 times Jesus says, do you love me? Feed my sheep. Do you love me? Take care of my little lambs. Do you love me? Feed my sheep. And what's going on there? I don't think Jesus is rubbing his nose in it. I don't think he's like, hey, let me remind you one more time that you denied me 3 times. That's not what's going on. I think that Jesus is saying, Simon Peter, hear me. I predicted this. I knew this was going to happen. I told you about it. And you denied me anyway 3 times. And what I need you to hear right now is not shame. It's not guilt. I'm not rubbing your nose in it. What I need you to hear is that the calling and the purpose and the kingdom work that I have for you is equal to and greater than your failures. I want you to feed my sheep, feed my sheep, feed my sheep. And here's what tells me that I think that's what's going on. You ready? Remember, pull that back out. What name did he call him? Simon. Let me break down a 4-hour word study I did a couple months ago as I was prepping for this. Quickly, the gospel writers in Jesus almost never refer to Simon Peter by his birth name. He was Simon, and he's called to follow Jesus, and that's one time that Jesus uses his birth name. And later on in the ministry of Jesus, Simon makes this great declaration of belief that you are the Christ. And in that moment, Jesus refers to him and says, hey, you are Simon. And this wasn't revealed for you by men on earth, but my Father in heaven. And you know what? On your confession, it's the rock by which I'm going to build my church. And so from here on out, Simon, you're going to be called Petros or Rock or Peter, right? And he gets this new name. Those are two big moments where he's called and he makes the confession. Big moments where Jesus and the gospel writers use his birth name. The other three, he's failed. He's biffed it. He's dropped the ball. One of them's a moment of just utter selfishness and pride. Another one's a moment of not trusting Jesus' character and not trusting Jesus' ways. And then you got this one where he's absolutely fractured his relationship with Jesus. And Jesus doesn't call him Simon Peter. Jesus doesn't call him Peter. I think like a father, he's getting down eye to eye, across from the breakfast table, and he's saying to him, oh, Simon. Not like my mother would do. Matthew Dale. I think he's going, Simon, hear me, child. I told you that you were going to fail. I knew about it before you ever even did it. I'm not scared of that. And you know what? I died and resurrected for you anyway. Because my love is agape love. And I don't need you to be the goodest little Christian boy in all the land in order for you to earn my love. My love is unconditional. What I need for you, Simon, is to put the shame shovel down and stop beating yourself up and stop running from me. I need you to rest in my love. To rest in the confidence that you know that my love is unconditional for you, right? And so at the breakfast table that morning for Simon Peter, there was an offering of rest, and there was an invitation to purpose and kingdom work. Feed my sheep. And so here I stand across the breakfast table from a bunch of Simons, right? Dude, I work with you guys, and I'm not just, students, the adults think I'm talking to just you. Okay, I work with some of y'all adults too, and some of y'all, I stand in front of a room full of Simons, right? And I know my students, and if you're like anything like my students, I know some of you, you're caught up in it. You failed. You've succumbed to temptation. You went back to that addiction. You mistreated that other youth group kid for your own elevation, right? You got that relationship that's leading you down roads. And I could just go on in all the ways that I know that if you're like my students, that so many of you in this room are sitting there squirming like Simon, spiritually with your shoulders down and your head down, right? And you're sitting there and you're thinking, he must be so upset at me. He must be so ashamed of me. And you've been avoiding him, running from him, his presence, his word, his people. And so the same things are on the table for you. No matter what you've done or where you've been, Jesus invites you tonight to the breakfast table, and he says to you, I have an offering for you. The thing that I'm offering you is rest. That I don't need anything from you morally. Now, of course, I want you to follow me, and I want you to treat people the way that I treat them, but I don't need anything from you morally in order for me to love you. Probably the most important verse in all of Scripture, in my opinion, is Romans 5:8. And it says that God demonstrates his own love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Basically, while you were in it, while you were caught up in it, while you were failing in the biggest ways possible, Jesus is like, yep, I want that one. I'm going to die for them no matter what. You think that he didn't know about what you're caught up in? He's the flipping God of the universe. He created time and space. He exists outside of it. You don't think he didn't know about your failings and your failures long before you were ever even born? But you know what? He died anyway because he loves you. If he needed moral performance from you in order for him to love you, why don't we just stick with the Old Testament? Why send your son to die on the cross? That would make no sense. Jesus on the cross is proof to you that there's nothing you could ever do to make God love you any less. Jesus on the cross is proof to you that he doesn't need you to do anything more in order for him to love you more. His love is perfect love, and it doesn't depend upon your good or your bad, right? And so tonight at the breakfast table, students and adults, he's got on one side this offering of rest. Put down the shame shovel. Stop running from me. Open up and bring your struggles and your sin out of the darkness into the light. Talk to an adult. Talk to a trusted friend, right? He's offering you rest in his love. And on the other side of the breakfast table, Simon's, he's got an invitation. That, man, if you accept this rest in his love, holy cow, you're going to love the invitation. His invitation is purpose, kingdom work. It's feed my sheep. He wants you to get behind him and go where he goes and do what he does and love people the way that he's loved you, right? Follow him, do what he does. He wants you to feed his sheep. And here's the thing. A lot of times I think, and I'm guilty of this too, but as a church, and I'm talking Big C church like globally, I think we do you guys a disservice sometimes because we tell stories about the big and the grandiose, right? We're like, hey, if you're going to follow Jesus, let me show you a story about these kids that raised $4 billion and bought underwear for the whole world. You know, like we just highlight these huge stories that like, man, God shows up and it's super cool. But if you're like me, you're sitting out there, you're like, man, I want to accept this invitation of purpose and kingdom work and feeding sheep, but like, I don't know if I'm cut out for that, right? And I think we do you a disservice because we make it this huge thing that seems insurmountable. And I'm here to tell you right now, the person who meant more to me in my faith when I was a student in high school who came to Christ as a sophomore has never been on a stage. I mean, she might have sang some songs, but she wasn't someone that you point a spotlight at and highlight. She's a single youth volunteer lady at my home church, and I had nobody from my family coming with me because I was an unchurched kid. And when I would show up, my friends wouldn't show up on Sunday morning, so I'd sit by myself. She'd come sit by me. She'd check in on me. She'd love on me. She'd give me a hug every time she saw me. She was just present. When I went to college, she bought me my first set of twin sheets. Holy cow, I'd be careful there, but I had a Freudian slip of a wordy dirt. She brought me my twin sheets that I took to college. I still use those at church camp and CIY and Move and Mix until 2 summers ago when she bought me a new set, Oklahoma Sooners. Woo-woo. She's nothing fancy, nothing huge. But like, I would not be here if it were not for Mama Judith. Where's Hope City at? She went to your church. She moved from my hometown in Stillwell, Oklahoma to Joplin to be near her daughter and her son-in-law. She went to your church the last few years that she battled stomach cancer. And in January, I went up to interview someone to hire them as a female youth minister on staff. And I got to go sit by her hospice bed and tell her, that any influence I have over students, whether on a stage or in a crowd or at youth group, it never would have happened if it weren't for just a lady who was present. And so I'm here to tell you tonight, he doesn't need you to raise $5 gajillion. That's not what he's calling you to. Now, maybe some of you guys will be a part of some big, great things, but you know what he's calling you to? It's the same thing he called Peter to. The invitation is, dude, just follow me. Love my sheep the way that I have loved you. And you're sitting there going, Tibbit, I don't know what that looks like. What do you mean feed my sheep? What do you mean feed my sheep, take care of my lambs? I don't know what that looks like. Here's what I'm here to tell you. You ready? Oh, you do. You do know what it's like to love the sheep that Jesus has put in your life the way that he's loved you, because you've been quoting the Good Shepherd like guidebook all week long. You've been memorizing it, quoting it, saying out loud as a MOVE event. All he's asking is for you to be good in shepherding and loving the sheep and people in your life in the same way that he has been good in shepherding and loving you. And what do I mean? The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He replenishes, restores, nourishes my soul. When I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil because he is with me. And I could go on and on, but let's stop right there. Can you be a good shepherd to the people in your life and make sure that in the same way that Jesus has made sure that you lack nothing, can you try to make an effort to make sure that the people and the sheep in your life don't have a need? And that need might be a coat in winter and you recognize somebody hadn't worn a coat for 2 months and it's 20 degrees, can you give them an old coat? Buy them a new one? That need may be someone to sit with them at lunch and be a friend and an encouragement to them. That need may be that when they're struggling with that stunt on cheer squad or that play in football or learning that rotation in volleyball, instead of watching them fail because it makes you look better, you stick around after practice to help them with that, to help them with their homework. Dude, I could go on and on with all the very simple needs that are happening around you. But here's what you got to do. You ready? In order for you to be a good shepherd, like your good shepherd has been good to you, you have to pull your spiritual head out of your spiritual rear end and stop living like this life is about you and you're the main character. You're not. You're not. You're never going to notice the sheep around you that need a friend and a coat and an encouragement and a prayer and a hug when you're focused at your own lunch table with the people that build you up and they're safe and that's why you're with them. You keep living your life day to day like your life is all about you elevating your academic and athletic and social prowess. You got to pull your head out of your rear and realize it's not about you. You're not the main character. It's about him, and he's saying to you, inviting you tonight to love his sheep that he's put in your life. And maybe it's not making sure they don't have a need. Maybe it's being green pastures and still waters and nourishing their soul, right? I don't know if you guys know this, but the culture in the world that you live in right now is sucking the life out of students. The world is dark and ugly and awful, and it is literally draining you guys. The world is a dark, dark desert void of nourishment and water. And you guys as a generation have never felt like you don't stack up and you don't belong and you don't fit and no one wants you more than any generation on the face of this planet. You're the most anxious, depressed generation to ever walk the face of this earth. And Jesus is saying, hey, could you be green pastures? Could you be still waters? Could you nourish people's souls? People that feel like they don't fit and they don't belong. They don't have anyone on their side. Can you come alongside them and lift them up and encourage them and pray for them, write a note for them? Just be present with them. And here's the last one. The dark valley, holy cow. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil because he is with me. Can you be with people who go through it? And let me tell you, I hate to even talk to a room right now and challenge you to be with people in dark valleys when so many of you are in them yourselves. Like you guys, you're the most traumatized, broken generation that's ever existed on this planet. I don't like talking, it's so encouraging tonight, right? But like, man, you guys go through it at home, divorce and conflict. You go through it at school, the bullying and the belittling. Like you guys have gone through it, right? Anxiety and depression. And what you need to know is every kid that you walk past in the hallway, every student that you sit with in the cafeteria, every person on your ball team, statistically, they're either going through or have gone through or will go through some really, really dark, dark, trying times. And you can keep your head in your spiritual rear and keep living life as if you're the main character, or you can pull it out and see the signs. They're never going to come up and go, I'm depressed. Hey, I need a friend. But if you're a good shepherd, like your good shepherd's a good shepherd, say that again. You open your eyes and you'll see, wow, they sit by themselves all the time. Man, I've noticed her appearance has really changed the last couple months. Man, that kid stopped showing up at youth group. That kid doesn't even act like school and sports mean anything anymore. And they used to be all about, you'll notice these signs. And God doesn't need you to have the answer and figure it out for them. You know what he needs you to do? Just be with them. Because that's what he does for you in the dark valleys. Just be present. Let them know they're not alone. The bottom line is this, students. You ready? You sit across the breakfast table from the Son of God, and the topic at hand is your greatest failure. And he looks at you and says, we don't even have time to discuss that. Because I just need you to rest in my love. Stop running, stop beating yourself up. Take this offering of rest. And I'm inviting you, calling you to purpose and kingdom work. Be my light in this dark world. Can you love my sheep? But the question is, what happens after breakfast? Do you go back to your lives from this moment right here on? Do you go back to your lives being the main character, hiding your sin, not opening up and being transparent, continuing with your shame shovel, running from God? Or do you embrace perfect, bottomless love and take up the lantern of loving the people that he's put in your life, loving his sheep?